Okay, so I think we'll get started and then I'll continue to let people in as they come in and we can have this lovely cascade of people joining us. Thank you so much to everyone who's joining us today for the first in the webinar series. Yeah, get the slide back up because I can't remember the lengthy title that this is off the top of my head.
Sorry, I didn't do that on purpose. Everyone, I am really sorry. This is going to be a work in progress. This is my first ever one of these. So apologies. We'll be learning as we go along.
Building the plane as we fly it, right? Not the research. So essentially what we're trying to do here, and Serena will give you a much more eloquent and detailed overview in terms of the research that she's done. But recently, Serena attained a doctorate. So she's now Dr. Serena Gonçalves Fish. And within that research, she was really focused on the future of corporate learning and development and technology accelerating organizations. She undertook extensive research to obtain that doctorate, and her findings are incredibly applicable and useful for us as learning professionals in terms of the direction that we need to be taking in order to remain relevant and impactful for our organizations. So today, Serena's going to talk you through her research and some of the key findings, and also let you know what you can come to expect with the rest of the webinar series in terms of guests that she's got planned and some of the further information in terms of the topics that will be covered in subsequent webinars. So this one's a bit of a broad overview to give you a flavor and an idea of what's to come and give you some of the key findings that have come out of all of that extensive research. So I've already talked far too much. This is not my webinar. Serena, I'll hand over to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time and sharing your research. I mean, you know, what a pleasure in the first and foremost from the outset. Thank you.
Thank you. I am eternally grateful to Ashley and Mass Marketing for supporting me in this. As you have seen, I'm a bit of a all over the place trying to host this on my own. Thank you for being here. When I started this journey 6 years ago, I said that it would always be free and always be for our learning community. I genuinely believe that we are at a cusp of sorts wherein we are not entirely sure what our future is and what L&D will look like, or whether we'll even be relevant to organizations of tomorrow. I'm hoping that what I will share in the next few sessions and through my thesis is options for various parts of your journey. If I can request whoever it is to please be on mute, that would, thank you so much. We didn't want to mass mute everybody so that you could ask questions at some point as well. So let's get going. I wanted to just highlight, and there's a whole lot of stats on this slide, but the main thing is that on average, there are 137,000 startups emerging every day, according to Microsoft in 2022. And I pulled out a few areas or fields which weren't even relevant about 15 years ago. And there are 150 million startups in the world. So if any of us think that at any point in our career, we will not be either working for one or being in any kind of a client or supplier partnership with them, we've got a bit of another thing coming. Just on the screen amounts to about 30% of where we are, and this will just keep going up. So one of the bits which came across was, how do organizations evolve? And we have this very nice pattern which was established, and it's something I shared with AR-UVR as well, whose board I sit on. In the beginning, organizations are built on reputation. They're the founders' contacts. They work on an ad hoc basis. There's a lot of face-to-face going on. And then as they slowly start trading, you get customers, you get some processes, and you get some channels. But you're still pretty much a bunch of guys in and women in a WeWork center. But then you move on to becoming an organization. You need a niche, you need a structure, you need an operating model. You need to make sure that you have a valid value proposition. And then finally, you can go to the growth phase. What actually happens?
Yes. Sorry,
Miriam, please, can I ask? Thank you. So around 90% of startups fail in this phase, and we don't have companies or organizations which really go to that next level. And why does that happen? Most of the time, it has nothing to do with us. It's the market and the cash, but then comes the team, and then comes the competition, and then comes the cost, and then slowly you start looking at where people issues come into the success of an organization. So here are some quotes which came about through my research. So the focus of what L&D is versus what is in the market. And at this point, I want to tell you that I spoke with 68 people across the world. They were CEOs, COOs, chief people officers, chief learning officers, thought leaders who are contributing into the L&D profession, and consultants and those who've written about our profession, studied it from the outside in. I'm afraid the university and my criteria doesn't allow me to name people individually, but I think several of you on this call and those who will come and speak in future webinars have all been part of my research in one way or the other. But of these 68 people, I had leaders from every continent, from South America, North America, Africa, EMEA, and Asia Pac. Within Asia Pac, China, India, Australia. I have really scoured the world, and these are themes that are coming up every single time. We look at L&D like it's training. We look at L&D like it's content. And we look at L&D like it's something we do to people and remove them out of the context of their work in order to absorb. And if that's how we keep looking at L&D, we're not going to be around for much longer for that. So one of the things that this became my exam question, our organizations are forming, they are merging, they are growing, and they are folding at a faster pace now than ever in history, and largely due to technology. And more learning is online and free. If you ask anyone in your organization, when they don't know what to do, what do they do? Or when they don't know something, what they do? Number one is Google. Number two is ask the person sitting next to them. The LMS rarely cracks the top 5. So then what is our role? And the other question that I like throwing out, and I've thrown out in the doctorate as well, if somebody removed the learning function from the organization, would anybody notice? What would happen instead? And you can actually go and create a whole alternative reality, cottage industries of learning, people finding out stuff more. Yes, there might be some disruption because systems are not managed and vendors are not centralized. But for the most part, it will make you sit back and think, what is our role in the new organization? What skills do we need to support the organization of the future? And have we reached a point where our function is largely redundant? And if that's not the case, what should we be doing? These were the main themes that came up from the research. The word cloud on the left is literally my whole findings chapter thrown into a word cloud, and you'll see by the words that have emerged how the themes are recurrent. And what you're seeing on the right is literally the chapters of my research. I go into how you introduce a learning function. There's a model I will take you through a bit now on what our skills and remit should be. And we talk a little bit more about the culture, the capabilities, and how we measure impact. Any following of me knows that I do not do any happy sheets or butts on seats. I have no idea how long people spend on the LXP or the consumption of content. What I'm interested is in business outcomes and business impact, because otherwise, why are we here? We could just teach people basket weaving. I spend a time on the anatomy of the future learning leader and what the future learning function should be. And then I know that this is not all encompassing. This is a spotlight on a particular type of industry and a particular set of issues. So what I have put forward as areas for further research and discussion are the journey to a learning leader, because we all know the barriers to entry to our profession are not very, very high. You would never find a chief legal officer who's not a lawyer, or a chief financial officer who didn't start out as an accountant or financial controller, but you'll very well find a chief learning officer who has no background in knowing anything on how adults learn. So I do believe that those are areas for further research that we need to go on to. And then therefore, some key conclusions from the team. I know I'm going at a little bit of a faster pace and it feels very one way, but once we finish all of this, I want to leave a lot of time for conversation and discussion. And I also want to share with you what's coming next so we can deep dive in future sessions and also as a conversation at the end of this. So for me, the role of learning will involve that of an architect. You guide knowledge creation and experiential learning, but all within the system and the context of an organization. And that bit is the most important, because our function or our profession is fundamentally socially constructed. We learn from each other within the context of what we are doing. There is no one size fits all. We are not a single scientific approach to how it's done. And as soon as we start thinking of the organization system first and the context within which we have to make people successful, our approach to how we develop them will change as well. So very key observation, especially from the startup. And I know that there's someone here who's already doing L&D in startups. We have no control over when we're introduced in an organization, and rightly so. I'll be introducing Tiana and Jackie in a future webinar where they'll tell you about the perils of when founders brought in L&D too early or too late, and what were the consequences of both. But we have fundamentally no control. And for the most part, that's a good thing. We are brought in based on the vision and the remit of the C-suite. And then we need to establish value. And that takes us back again to what the vision and the system of the organization is and the context of that organization. I've said this before, I will say it again. There are fundamental skills that L&D could get away with not knowing that are fast becoming mandatory. Ask 50 L&D professionals how adults learn, and you will get 27 million different answers. This will go away. Understanding the context of an organization, the commerciality that makes it successful, how an individual performance can then impact team performance and then business performance. These will become fundamental skills that we will not be able to get away with. And for all that to happen, learning will have to be connected to wider processes of talent, business strategy, strategic HR, data, and even, to my point, the market more than ever before. Please, I know Ashley has said it, keep putting questions on chat or save them. I don't have a lot of slides. The idea will be to stop at about 1/2 the hour or 40 past the hour so that we can have more interaction as possible. So this is the model that came out of the research that I constructed. So what should L&D know and be for firms of the future? If we have to look at this as a progression, and in all honesty, when you look at the doctorate, you will see this in a sort of a quadrant format using the Stephen and Kumi and Stevenson model. But it made more sense when I started to bring it out to people to lay it out in a linear structure. When I say L&D of the past, of today and tomorrow, it doesn't mean we are losing any of this. It just means we're reframing it in a different way. When L&D organizations are starting, they're brought in because you need a compliance. So you need your health and safety, you need your fundamental training on how to do your job. Local learning is in teams and in work groups. It's a very instructor-led type of model. Without thinking about what the pedagogy uses, it's a very directive instructor-led model. And then you move on to L&D as a coach. So I like to think about it as a coach on the sidelines. So still very much there, still calling the play, still leading the field, but managing that content, that framework, the LXP, our libraries, all that from the sidelines. And that doesn't go away, but where we need to evolve to is that facilitator and that architect. So thinking now of instead of you standing on the sidelines, you're going away and building this framework, this scaffolding, which everybody is allowed to fill in with imagination, knowledge creation, and the ability to direct their ability and their knowledge acquisition within the context of their role. For me, that bit on the top is fundamental to everybody. And Nigel Payne, whose research is very, very similar to mine, but has written a fantastic book on an organization learning culture. I'm sorry, I got a poll. What will come in and speak more on that. But if you do not know these terms, growth mindset by Carol Dweck, psychological safety by Amy Edmondson, design thinking, and above everything, reflection, because learning doesn't happen, as you know, Jan Folk, doesn't happen when you're taught and given a whole lot of knowledge. It goes away. It happens when you go away and reflect upon what you've learned and then put it into application. Those for me on the top are the non-negotiable skills that all of us will need to know and think about how we incorporate. I have now lost the ability to, there we go. For me, I broke this up then into fundamental learning skills. So adult learning, as I've said, business acumen, technology, and data. And then you look specifically at your organization that is in hypergrowth and systems thinking. It's not a new concept. It's been around for over 100 years. All of these now you start pulling out on these elements. Performance consulting, also not a new concept, been there since the 80s and 90s. Thinking of what the new learning organization means, again, drawing back to organization learning culture, and above it all, impact. I call what we do in L&D at the moment a postmortem to justify our existence. Oh, look how busy we are. So much content was consumed. Oh, look how busy we were. We ran so many courses. Oh, look how wonderful it is. People left with giving us a wonderful NPS or score. All of that is irrelevant if we don't find ways to show a direct link between people's development, progression, and acquisition of knowledge and business success. We will be doing ourselves a disservice. And we'll also be making ourselves, frankly, irrelevant. I wanted to give you an example. Now, the CHRO of Software One has agreed for one of the sessions. I'll show you that slide. But this is a typical journey in Software One. I am extremely lucky that I work for an organization that trusted this mad scientist to go away and create different structures and try put into practice what could well have just remained a nice 80,000 word piece of theory. But what Software One is doing in our corporate university, which I look after along with our talent management function, is take the skills we have, take the progression of those, and look at how everything becomes part of your journey. So you will see we have content to be consumed, but we don't actually track it. We look at where your assessments are. Assessments tend to be on project work or case studies or presentations, or certifications. They are all tied into a broader sense. When it says universal curriculum, it means that everyone gets consulting training, everybody gets soft skills, business skills, problem solving, critical thinking. Those go alongside all our technical learning. And this is just one sliver of a journey. We've replicated this about over 50 cohorts and over 35 curriculums. So it's very possible. And we still have a long way to go. I wanted to give you an example of, again, my world and where L&D fits in and how it's connected with other people's and systems. I'm in a very fortunate position because I look after a lot of this now, but I did not 6 years ago. This is about a year and a half, a 2-year-old phenomenon. And this is something I drew literally at the back of a napkin, and it looks like that as well. But you could be anywhere. You could look at the learning function. The academy as it sits at the moment could sit under you. And you need to think about, how do I tie in to each of these elements? So take performance management. Every one of our firms has performance management. And I always ask this at any stage I speak on. You do performance goals, you do development goals, and someone there is evaluating performance and development goals. How many L&D functions then have access to those development goals? How many of us collate them? Because if we were, that's your training needs analysis for the entire organization staring at you in the face twice a year. Well, 4 times if you do it on a quarterly basis. Workforce planning and talent acquisition. How many of us are tied into talent acquisition? How many of us know why we are hiring, who we are hiring, at what skill level, and in which location? So then you're stuck with this place where you go to these exit interviews and why people leave, and the amount of them that say we were not trained enough. And then you go, hang on a second. I don't know why we hired. I don't know who we hired. I'm not entirely sure when we hired. I know the when because we onboarded them on lovely generic onboarding. And then we had to provide training to make them successful. And then we wonder why the blame lies with us and how connected were we in the first place to all these various elements. And you take each of them. Who does the skills gap analysis in your organization? Do you do the learning parts associated with skills? Is your organization not yet in a place that does skills? What is your relationship with talent, talent review, high potential management, career pathing? Are you part of the build versus buy conversations? In fast-paced, hyper-growth, startup and scale-up organizations, the luxury, there was a quote on that up ahead, of having an L&D function that is not connected to wider organizational success will soon go away. Or if you stay, you'll stay because you're about to be publicly listed, or you are publicly listed, or you are a high compliance organization and you need a tick box which says we do learning and development and we develop our people. And if that's the learning person we want to be, there probably will be roles somewhere. But that's not who we are destined or we can be. I know the colors are a bit bizarre. I look after the academy. That's where I started. And then I got all of talent management. So everything in dark blue, workforce planning, performance management, and succession planning are things that I have built up over the last year and a half. The stuff in the other blue, I meant to say light, but it's not light enough, is everything I look after, but I haven't got right yet. I have the principles in place. We will have a system in place by the end of the year, but it's an ever, with our organization design, which I look after as well, constantly evolving. All of those elements will always be in force. Our learning and development team looks after leadership development and soft skill training, and our talent acquisition team looks after recruitment. But the elements that feed into it are the wider talent agenda. And all of this could be very different from yours. But the one thing I want to highlight is the interconnectivity between all of us. So some key conclusions. Your learning strategy has to be part of a wider talent management strategy. It just does. Go seek it out if you're not sure where it is. The only way to foster growth within our workforce and ensure long-term success of our learning initiative is if you know what's happening with strategic HR, with the business strategy, and with your talent management. And in order to do that, L&D needs to understand the correlation between the various organizational systems, between the commerciality of the learning function, and know what it is to make both teams and businesses successful and the link between the two of them. And in my very humble opinion, there will be no need for a standalone or a checkbox L&D function. Anyone can buy tech, anyone can buy content, and anyone can measure their consumption. It's time for us to start thinking about what our USP is for the businesses of tomorrow. A quick one. These are the upcoming webinars that I have. Like I said, I only plan to talk for about 30 minutes to 35 minutes. Each of these elements we will go into. A little bit about my speakers. So everyone probably has heard of Dr. Nigel Payne. He has written many, many books. He's the ex-Chief Learning Officer of the BBC. He was my industry guide through the doctorate. And he has recently written a book based on his doctorate on organizational learning and the systems that support them. So Nigel will be part of a future series. Jackie, who's a very dear friend of mine, is currently head of capability at PMI, which is Philip Morris, and Tiana, who will talk about her experience. Both of them have set up learning functions in startup organizations, brought in at different times with different learnings, and they'll be sharing that. Very, very pleased that Brandon Carson, who's the Chief Learning Officer of Starbucks Worldwide, and Brian Murphy, who heads organizational capability for Microsoft. It was AstraZeneca before this. They'll be joining us to talk about how the same element or the same learnings from hypergrowth organizations and transforming learning, works for when you're transforming learning in organizations that are fundamentally changing their operating models and their structures. I have to confirm the second CHRO. Of many I spoke with, a lot shared some very personal elements of their firm and where they were with. So I'm waiting for one confirmation. But I'm very pleased that Catalina will be there to speak about what is a CHRO in a startup, a scale-up, a hyper-growth and transforming organization looking to L&D for. And Catalina is the ex-CHRO of DataCamp. I'll be joined by Niles Nolan, which is Amanda and Laurie. And we have to talk about the role of EdTech in the future of L&D. And that's the same reason for the next one. They're both huge elephants in the room at the moment, AI and EdTech. And I'm also very pleased that Don Taylor and Egler will be joining to discuss that. On marketing for learning, I have Ashley again coming back with Bianca Bauman with two very, very different perspectives. Bianca talks about how you use marketing concepts in the building of your learning function, and Ashley touches upon the after, because you could use the best AI and have the best platform and have the best framework in the world for imparting learning means nothing if nobody knows about it. And so finally, the bit would be how you make it actionable. And we're going to use the Software One Academy as a case study. And Julia Brown is going to talk to us about how an organization that did 21 acquisitions in 3 years and went from 2,000 people to 9,500 people in 90 countries have used strategic HR, learning, and talent to transform themselves. On that note, I'm sorry, I really like that picture. And I decided to bring it in. Any questions?
Well, there's been quite a few actually. So first of all, thank you for that. You know, as we kind of said, high level overview, more of a teaser to give you guys a bit of a feel for what's to come. And I mean, what an incredible list of guests that you have coming as well, some industry stalwarts and expertise across multiple disciplines. So really, really looking forward for what's to come. And we will obviously let everybody know as and when the dates for those come out. So I expect we're going to just do them in order. That we're trying to do maybe one a month or thereabouts, Serena, so we're not doing too much within your day job. So obviously we love this photo because Serena, if you guys don't know, just won the Colin Steed Award, the Learning Awards last week. This is for a lifelong contribution to the learning industry. It replaces the Colin Corder Award, if you're familiar with what that was. One Colin for another. So again, congratulations, Serena. Very, very well deserved award. So yeah, let's keep that picture up. I want to look at it a little bit longer. So first question for you is how, this is back to that, you know, that slide you had with the multiple circles around the role that L&D was in the past and where we are in the future. How do we describe an L&D architect and an L&D coach? What are the traits that make, sorry, I was trying to mute people. What are the traits that make a learning professional, an L&D facilitator or architect? So are there certain qualities that a learning and development professional might exhibit or need to acquire from a skill perspective in order to be more of a facilitator or an architect over a coach? Or
it's a really good question. I want to re-emphasize that. So first, I'm afraid I can't see the question, so I am relying on Ashley, but please keep them coming. And if I cannot answer them, I figured out that there's a way to even answer them on the chat function or for YouTube channel that I have just figured out how to create. So the answers will be there. The first thing I want to remind you is that those three are set out in a sort of linear bubble fashion, but none of them exist without the other. Everybody has to aim to become that architect at the end, but you do need the skills from the previous two sections as well. And then it comes to how you position yourself. And this has been going on for years, where we talk about when someone comes to us and says, can you build me a training on change management that is 3 days for these people and covers these topics? Are we the ones that go, yes, sir, 3 bags full, sir? Or are we the ones that can establish to go back and go, what is the business problem you are trying to solve? And in order to initiate that conversation, you have to understand your business. You've got to understand the commercials, and you've got to understand what it is that's not working that needs to start working. So the skills that I would say, the first one is where you place yourself in the business. What are the expectations you allow for yourself or allow for the business to have of you? And from there leads on to the concepts that I put up across, understanding how organization learns, understanding systems thinking, understanding connectivity. So I hope I've answered your question, but they're not 3 bubbles, or they're not 3 linear, or rather they're not 3 linear bubbles. You feed into each of them, and right on the top are the skills, and at the bottom are the skills that allow you to function and move across, because you still have to fulfill those previous roles, right? Compliance learning still comes under you. You still have health and safety. You still have things that you need to do as part of being a listed company or being a highly governed industry. So think about it as more of an interplay. The model is an interplay, and what skills you can have to play across all of them.
Awesome. Thank you. And you mentioned systems thinking there. So Sonia had a question around that. So she said, I agree that systems thinking is key for L&D, and I've seen great benefit as a team who had this skill. However, a similar approach is seen as a component of OD. I'm curious to know if the webinar's title, Organizational Mastery, does it hint that we could be OD and L&D as we move into the future?
Ooh, somebody caught me out there. Yes, indeed. I do not believe that. So actually, to be honest, let me just backtrack. Organizational mastery had nothing to do with organizational development. It just sounded cool.
At least you're honest.
There was no connection when it was made there, but I am more than happy to share my doctorate, and yes, a lot of principles of OD have been brought into into the doctorate and into the world of L&D. And as we start delving into it, you will see where the lines get more and more blurred, and you'll actually start that link between learning being individual development, individual performance, team performance, and functional performance, to overall organizational development and performance. That is exactly the pathway that we should be leading, because who else is going to do that if not us? The other bit which you'll also see in the systems thinking is the juxtaposition between performance consulting and systems thinking. And I have both of them there, and they both play a part. So without getting too theoretical, performance consulting sort of, there's an assumption that I will do this and I will get that result, right? I will train you properly in your sales methodology and I will teach you how to sell, and then you will go out and you will sell, and how much you sell is directly correlated. That performance is directly correlated to the learning intervention I gave you. No, because the market's different, the people you're talking to are different, the skills you'll draw upon are different in different circumstances. And then we might have given you a really, really bum region to go and sell in, and you pulled out some stuff from the bag that had nothing to do with the learning. Systems thinking allows you to factor in all those other elements. It allows you to recognize that the organization is a system and that our roles are part of a wider system and how they play upon each other. So that was a very, very long way of saying, yes, OD, yes, L&D, organizational mastery, you just sounded cool.
Awesome. Next question. What tips do you have for L&D professionals to build and nurture these connections to other systems and functions, especially if other functions are not used to keeping L&D on the top of their stakeholder list?
It's a very, very good question. And it's also, in quite honesty, it needs more opinions on this, because again, what we do is socially constructed and we learn from each other. The magic of looking at startup scale-ups and hypergrowth and transforming organizations is you start from a point of either zero and you're trying to achieve a journey of X, or you're starting from a point of X and you're transforming to a Y. So there's always this baseline that I have to do. But what do you do and how do you pull this into organizations where you're already established with a vision of what people in the organization think you are? They think you're an order taker. They think you deliver training. They think you manage the LXP, and they think that you provide content. What are you to do in situations like this? And that is the hardest answer, because that's when you're trying to change the narrative. If you look at Meister's trust equation, that's where you're trying to go in from being the vendor, the supplier provider, to becoming a trusted advisor. And that is not an easy journey, and that is not an easy place to establish yourself. There's no single answer for this, I'm afraid, until you start putting yourself in a position where you start linking what you are doing to business outcomes and business success. And you start linking the issues you're trying to solve to business issues. Without that, with people don't care about your context as much as they care about their context, right? And if we start off by going, this is what L&D is looking to do and achieve, we're starting wrong.
Yeah. So proving our value, right?
Mm-hmm. What is our value? By the way, I'm also, apologies, because it is now raining and there is a racket of rain on the conservatory roof, because that's just how life works as well.
Lovely, just Serena voice, the dulcet tones. I can't hear any rain or any background. So I'm happy to stay on. We're at 22, but we've got a couple more questions if you're happy to answer them.
I'm absolutely happy to answer them.
Fabulous. So Karen's asked, is there any particular type or size of company that you think does this really, really well? Does it come down to commitment from senior leadership to take a more holistic and strategic view rather than a tick box approach?
That's a really good question. When I started out, I was trying to come up with more. Most of my research is qualitative, but I always thought, oh no, we need some numbers in these things. And so what would be the ideal organization size before you introduced an L&D function? Could not get a uniform answer to that. And then what are examples of L&D working perfectly for an organization of 10,000 versus 20,000 versus 200 and 400,000, right? And there isn't. And if you go to the market, and this comes back to us not having single benchmarks or single barriers to entry or single scales of measurement, one of the things that you wind up finding is that what really, really works for one organization doesn't entirely work for the other, because what works for a manufacturing company doesn't work for professional services. So I'm going to plead the fifth and start with it depends. But what I am going to say is that the most successful organizations, and I'm very fortunate because a lot of people I have invited, actually everyone I have invited, have worked with very successful organizations, and the connectivity of their HR and L&D and talent and supporting functions to their business context, to their product, and above all to their market is what determines what makes it successful or not. I see a lot of organizations which the L&D divests itself from the technical skills and abilities of its workforce, focusing on just that framework of soft and business and consulting and leadership and all of that. And I've seen it where it's all lumped together under a central L&D. Again, it all depends on how agile you are to change with the business context and the business strategy, and how much you keep connected to that. There is no one silver bullet, as we like to say.
No, that doesn't exist in any context. Hey, we've got another question from Carla. What are the biggest barriers to remove? Are there any which were a real game changer for you in Software One?
So I'm, again, the biggest barriers are everybody's got a day job, and everybody here knows that as well. It's the same barrier to getting people to take your courses. It's the same barrier to having people have the time to sit down with you. And it's the same barrier to actually your success. But the time, and that's not going to go away. Nobody's ever going to have enough time. You're never going to get enough of time with the business to state your case. So I think what we had to do in the academy was flip the narrative around. We had to start with saying, tell me, if you brought in somebody with zero experience, what do you want them to be able to do in 3 months? Should they be 30% billable? Should they be doing 7,000 tickets a month? Should they be able to shadow 35% of all our sales calls? Should they be making X calls a day? What is the outcome you are looking to achieve? And then we work backwards. And then we started immediately capturing our case studies. We started going, it takes us, I'm going to make up some figures, but it's very much a real case study. It takes us in Germany 6 months to hire this role. The average notice period in Germany is between 3 and 6 months. So therefore, if you hire somebody with 1.5 year experience, you're actually losing an average of 6 months before they are actually on the ground and billable to you. How about if you take somebody who's starting their career, a graduate, 3 months in the academy, we'll start with 30% billability. They don't have a notice period. They are willing to learn. We will get them this certification, and this is what the learning will achieve. We will cover client relationships. We will cover executive presence. And at the end of it, this is what you'll have, and this is the amount that you will save, or this is what you will have gained. And then those things going back to the business, talking numbers that they understand, makes them feel that you get their context. And then some of the barriers go away. Time and agility will always be a problem, but at least now you've managed to get that foot in the door because you're talking to people in a language that they get, that's relevant for them.
Thank you. Okay, we just got 1 or 2 more questions, and I actually have one that I wanted to let you through over here as well. It's not complex, I promise.
Thank you, everybody, for staying on, by the way. This is, I really wanted this to be as much of a conversation as possible. So I really appreciate all the questions coming in.
So I'm curious about, as L&D, we often talk about either following orders from the business, taking a seat at the table. However, we serve learners and rarely include or reach out to them and talk to them when it comes to understanding their context and the gap it is the gap be it performance or productivity. What do you think about this?
So I think three different things from that question. So the first thing is, isn't it mad we say learners? I mean, the finance team doesn't call the people expense submitters, and it's the only function that labels people based on what we do to them, not what they are for their job. Is that there's something? It's a whole can of worms. I just find that term, and I use it myself. I wish we could think of something else because it really gets to me. The second thing was going back to now I forgot the second thing. Repeat the question again, please, Ashley. My mind has gone in 20 different directions.
So essentially, they're saying we're our role is taking a seat at the table or taking orders from the business. We're actually here to serve learners, and we don't really often take the time to speak to them.
That's right. I just got the second thing. It goes back to your performance management piece, which I mentioned. Again, how many of us look at the outputs of performance management? Therein lies what your learners, I said it, I'm gonna berate myself later and think of something else to say, but for now, therein lies what your learners want from you. That is your training needs analysis. That is their development needs. That is what they are looking in front of them as this ginormous performance mountain that they have to climb, and what support they need to get there. And we don't have access to that. And they are telling us, how many of us look at exit interviews? How many of us are looking at promotion cases? Finding your people getting your people to find extra time to talk to you is really hard. They are giving you that information in many other ways, in many other ways. And unless we can show that we are listening to that pulse of the business or the pulse of the workforce, trying to get more time to talk to them, I'm not entirely sure that that's the way forward. So those would be, and that's my third summary to all of this. When you are reshaping your position in an organization, please start to reshape how you look, how people can talk to you within the organization. It's completely unconnected, but it's a good point to bring it on. One of the things that we did was we partnered with One Tree Planted. And One Tree Planted plants, it charges you $1 a tree, and it plants it in your name anywhere in the world. So what we start saying is that the more tech mentors we have, the more we have focus groups, the more feedback we get, the more people that join the academy, the more people, put anything as your benchmark, right? We did it as the number of people that joined Software One. For everyone that joined Software One through the academy or through talent acquisition, a tree is planted in your name somewhere in the world. It cost us $3,000. Can you imagine the amount of input we got as a result of it? Because we're planting trees to support reforestation and biodiversity. No connection whatsoever. Think of ways that the organization is going to talk to you that makes it worthwhile talking to you. But also remember, they are already talking to you in many ways that they interact with our HR systems and processes. It's just a matter of going and finding out that information.
One of my clients on research and gathering, obviously we do different types of research for massing and do market research for personas and that sort of thing. But one of our clients actually just did a huge exercise in terms of mining their workplace or their Viva Engage or whatever social platform you've got. There's conversations happening there that are public, that you can view, you can read. If you take the time to even just go into dig into places like that, there's a huge listening exercise that can go on. And I totally agree. I think the qualitative research is crucial, but this stuff can supplement that as well. And there are plenty of ways that there's a lot of data that you already have in the business. And then there are just ways to tap into it, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I think that we've just established this one way of communication, or no way of communication, which is even worse. And that's probably why we find ourselves not always on the pulse of what we do.
Yep. Right, last question from me.
I just saw a pop-up which from Sonia, and I don't know why this chat popped up because I can't see any of the other ones. Customers. Actually, I just want to point out there, who is your customer? Is your customer the employee or is your customer the business? Because if it
They
was
both
just,
are. So if you can hear me, Serena,
oh, I can, yes.
and just my experience, not to say it's right or wrong, experience which has yielded some results. My customers are everyone inside or outside, right? So business is my customer, learners are my customer, and I have seen for myself and our team shifting that perspective, just looking at them as a customer. You tend to say, hey, let me talk to them. And when I say to them, means not to an expert or to a business guy or a manager telling me, this is what I need. This is what my people need, right? Or even performance data speaking for that matter, any of that, right? And that's what I think we want to say when we say we are people centric,
Yeah.
right? And maybe that's out of fashion now. I
It-
don't know, but
no,
we found as team great value. So by customer, I just meant that.
no,
That
that's absolutely fine. I wasn't challenging you. I wanted to
no,
elaborate on what
no,
you were
I
saying.
was just
So one
sharing.
of the things that I
Yeah.
wanted to say is that if there is a hierarchy, in my humble research and opinion, your business comes first, right? Because otherwise, you might as well be teaching them, to my point, basket weaving or salsa dancing. The outcomes of a productive workforce have to be the business success. When you have to have what you are giving people has to, especially if you're in a startup or a scale up or a hyper growth organization where they're failing around you left, right, and center. The earlier that one ties in people success to business success, and knowing the listening ears that you need from your consumer is what is it that they believe they need to be successful, and therefore what is the role that you play in it. And that's where I was going. And
No, I totally agree with you. I think I'll just clarify my point if it's okay if I have a second too. Is when I mentioned engaging the learner, as I love to call, let's call the person the learner. In this whole conversation, we tend to miss the learner entirely. And
yeah,
I'm not saying that I'm going to ask the learner and say, what do you want to learn and how you want to learn? And I'm going to give you that. No, not for that purpose. There is a whole world that an individual has, which is impacting, and that kind of relates to system thinking, what you're talking about, right? So my view of 30 years is that at one point we did focus a lot on understanding what we called our audience through various other tools.
Yep.
And then we moved to design thinking, which was about, people, how they think, their journey, their emotion, which meant getting those people into the room as well. When you're talking about with business, and that's the kind of setup design thinking workshops always had. And I
yep.
think there's a lot of value in that. And of course, as we all evolve, different things evolve. So I was just trying to
Yep.
bring in from
No,
that perspective, definitely not to I totally am one for impact and
I think we are
performance.
vociferously agreeing with
Yeah.
from two different perspectives. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah. Thank you for the question, taking the question.
Awesome. Well, I think we're pretty much at time, and people have kind of said they've have to jump, and they're going to check out the remains of the recording. So I think if people are on back-to-backs, we'll put a pause on that there. But Serena, thank you so much for coming and sharing even just this kind of preliminary webinar. It's just so interesting, and it just I'm not a learning professional, and it gets me thinking so much around the role we play as the learning function, and what we're supposed to be doing to serve the business. And so, I don't know if you have any parting thoughts. Otherwise, one thing I did want to ask you, not the question I was going to ask, but you mentioned you can share your doctorate. Is that something we could send to people along with the recording? Yeah.
I'd be very happy to. If you're happy to read 80,000 words, I'm very happy to send it to you. But I will say, please read, focus on the findings, the context, and the next steps or implications for practice. And please join us in the next series if you don't fancy reading 80,000 words.
Those are the cliff notes, are they?
These are the cliff notes. Thank
All
you.
right. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time. You're busy, and you're doing this for no other reason but to share with the industry. So thank you so much, Serena. Really just a pleasure listening to you speak. So this has been recorded, everyone. So we will send you the recording and Serena's doctorate as well in the next few days. So just bear with us as we do this around everything else that we're doing. And as I said, we'll be back in touch when we have the date for the next session.
Thank you. Bye all.
Thank you, Serena. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stop recording.